Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning. Reverend Laverne Imori will be giving our Sunday Dharma talk today. She has received her Tokudo in Kyoto, Japan, and she's been a minister's assistant for many years. She's been a member of the Seattle Betsuin and also Ekoji near Washington, D.C. Reverend Laverne leads our chanting practice on Saturdays at 1 o'clock where members chant Shoshinge, and you're welcome to join them. She and also Reverend Smitty Smith help the Dharma School in their Dharma talks and other activities. So with that, thank you very much, Reverend Laverne, for your Dharma talk.
Good morning, everyone. Please join me in Gassho as I read a passage from the Tanisho. However much love and pity we may feel in our present lives, it is hard to save others as we wish. Hence, such compassion remains unfulfilled. Only the saying of the Nembutsu, then, is the mind of great compassion that is thorough-going. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning again, San Diego. And actually, now that we're delivering our Dharma talks via Zoom, good morning to all of you wherever you're watching from. Today, I'd like to talk about compassion, at least my understanding of and experience with compassion, especially during this past month or so. And let me tell you, folks, compassion is hard. However, before I talk about compassion, I'd like to share a bit of background that led me to this topic. This path that I have chosen, the Shin Buddhist path, represents my own journey of deep self-reflection, self-realization, and hopefully self-transformation. My journey is rooted in the teachings of Shinran Shonin, as informed by the seven masters, and ultimately traced back to the teachings of Gautama Buddha. During my travels along the Shin Buddhist path, I've been privileged to encounter fellow travelers, including many teachers who share their stories and their teachings with me. But like a lot of journeys, I often take detours, side trips that take me off the path, only to be guided back by the teachings. I encounter many challenges along the way: potholes, it's a bumpy ride sometimes, dense fog, which shrouds my vision of the path ahead, and mirages that appear in the middle of deserts, delusions, and storms of terrifyingly deafening thunder and bolts of flashing lightning. This path reminds me of the story of the White Path, between the river of fire, which represents anger, and water, representing greed. Two of the three poisons, anger and greed, and the third being ignorance. The narrow white path represents weaknesses of my own aspirations to break through the chains of my own self-delusion to become liberated or enlightened. In Shin Buddhism, Amida Buddha is said to be the embodiment of wisdom and compassion. It's interesting that for me, the representation of compassion in the form of kannon has popped up several times in my life, even before my encounter with Shin Buddhism. One of the most precious gifts given to me by my dad over 50 years ago is this statue of kannon. And the statue has traveled with me from Okinawa to Washington State, Oregon, back to Washington State, all the way across country to Virginia, and then all the way back again now to California. It's a ceramic piece, and it's amazing it's still intact. But I especially like this because this kannon happens to be carrying the lotus, which has significance for me in my journey. But as I sometimes do, I've digressed down this narrow alley leading possibly to a dead end. So let me get back to the topic of compassion and to put my story into context. My mother, as some of you know, moved to San Diego to live with me in March of 2019. Mom turned 100 years old on March 10th, 2020. We had planned a party for her to be held here in San Diego on March 28th, the weekend of March 28th and 29th. And we had over 60 people traveling from Washington State, Hawaii, Minnesota, Texas, Florida. But then COVID hit and we had to cancel the celebration. And that was sad. On September 18th, just a month ago, after a visit with her doctor earlier in the week, I received a call from the doctor telling me that Mom was experiencing congestive heart failure. And she put me in touch with a palliative care physician, who in turn put me in touch with Sharp Hospice. On September 23rd, an intake nurse came to visit us, and Mom was accepted into Sharp's hospice program. That was about almost a month ago. And we have made arrangements for her to remain at home as long as possible, hopefully even to the end, with periodic visits from hospice nurse, hospice aides, and the social worker. Last week, we replaced her bed with a hospital bed. So, of course, my family and I, we thought we were prepared. After all, Mom's 100 years old. She had a quadruple bypass about 25 years ago, and she's been living in the past year or so with an aortic stenosis that isn't getting any better. And so this is a narrowing of an artery by her heart. So again, this should not have come as a surprise, and it wasn't really, but it has certainly been an adjustment. While Mom's been walking on her own with the assistance of only a cane until recently, I've noticed she's had a pretty rapid deterioration of her strength, where although she can still get around with her walker, she needs assistance and support to make sure she doesn't fall. So someone has to be with her all the time. A woman who took great pride in never needing naps, now she sleeps most of the day and night. Her appetite, though not as hearty and robust, she could eat my son-in-law, who's, I think Darren's about 5'10" or 5'11". She could eat him under the table, I think. And it's not as hearty and robust as it was 2 months ago, but it has diminished somewhat, although I'm told to expect that loss of appetite is imminent too. My mom has been a feisty and fiercely independent woman, and this loss of independence has been devastating. You know, I rue the fact that I don't have the type of mother-daughter relationship that some of my friends have, where the parent-child relationship has evolved into something more of a friendship with heart-to-heart conversations and advice. My mom is direct and commanding, and I have, over the years, learned to be somewhat passive and defensive around her. Although I find that during this past year and a half that we've been together, living together, that my defensiveness actually has turned into anger. But recently, the anger has dissipated, and I've watched her struggle and then become less angry and more accepting of her condition. I've observed her become quieter and perhaps somewhat more contemplative or anxious, I don't know which. And through my own emotional roller coaster, I've come to realize that on this leg of my journey with her, our goal is to work together to allow her as much independence as she's capable of, to work together to retain her sense of dignity, and to be, and most importantly, to be as comfortable as possible in the final days or weeks or months of her life. I've hoped that this experience of living with my mother would be a gift. And I was able to convince myself that she was a bodhisattva on my Shin Buddhist journey, who would teach me, who would help me become wiser and more compassionate, so that I too, in turn, could learn to help ease the suffering, or to be wiser and more compassionate with others. And until maybe about 2 or 3 months ago, I have been known to say that I think I'm failing in this in my bodhisattva experience. But nevertheless, throughout this recent experience, I've learned that compassion is really hard. My heart goes out to those of you that are in a caregiving situation and have been at it much longer than I can think of several of our Sangha members who are in find themselves in these particular circumstances. And as much as I'd like to tell you that my unconditional love and compassion have deepened, I have to admit it hasn't. As much as I try to achieve that unconditional and consistent compassion, I find myself oftentimes guilt-ridden and depressed when I lash out at my mother in anger or frustration or just sheer exhaustion for little things. And I'm reminded that especially in the wee hours of the morning when I help her to the bathroom, I do bite my tongue. And even if I said something, I don't know that she could hear because she doesn't have her hearing aids in. But she's really obsessive about washing her hands like for a whole minute or more instead of the required 20 seconds, right? And then she spends like a whole nother 60 seconds drying them off until I think her skin's going to just start peeling off. And at 2:30 or 3:30 or whenever it is in the wee hours of the morning, I admit I grow impatient. I don't say anything to her, but I do wish she didn't have to be so OCD about washing and drying her hands. And it's moments like these that remind me I'm on that narrow white path. I'm on that narrow white path that represents the weaknesses of my own aspirations to break chains of self-delusion and to become liberated or enlightened. But just like the traveler in the story, I realize that the only way forward for me, because I'm unable to break those chains to become liberated or enlightened, the only way forward, like the traveler, is toward that West Bank, towards the Pure Land, towards the voice of Amida, calling to me with wisdom and unconditional compassion. And that voice is saying, come just as you are, with singleness of heart. Do not fear the flames and waves. I shall protect you. So thank you for tuning in today. And please join me in Gassho as I reread the quote from the Tanisho. However much love and pity we may feel in our present lives, it is hard to save others as we wish. Hence, such compassion remains unfulfilled. Only the saying of the Nembutsu, then, is the mind of great compassion that is thorough-going. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.